So Jainism is an ancient religion that originated in India, and it focuses primarily on the practice of ahimsa, or non-harm. So ahimsa is an Indic virtue that or a value that we looked at briefly around in Hinduism with Mahatma Gandhi. But he was very influenced in his practice of ahimsa by Jainism, this ancient Indian religion. So Jainism focuses on freeing or liberating the soul or the jiva from karma, and feels that the only real way to free yourself from karma is to lessen the harm that you do to other beings. So the main cause of negative karma in our life is the harm that we do to other beings. And so we need to do whatever possible to lessen and eliminate the harm we do to other beings. So we just got finished with Buddhism, and we saw that Buddhism is called the middle way because the Buddha rejected extreme forms of asceticism or renunciatory behavior. But the Jains are a whole different story. So Jainism retains its renunciatory character. It's really an ascetic religion and has never really given that up. And so it calls on its followers to go to saintly extremes in the practice of ahimsa, or elimination of harm doing from their lives. So the Jains received the basic Indic teaching that we are not these physical bodies, but that we are really souls, eternal, non-material souls. The word the Jains use is jiva. And these souls are pure consciousness in their pure form. They're pure consciousness without form. And all jivas are basically alike. All jivas are pure bliss, pure energy, and omniscient in the Jain teaching. And these souls, they receive this basic Indic idea, right? That souls, jivas, become encrusted with karma through the actions we take in our daily life. And this jiva that becomes encrusted with karma then is stuck in this cycle of death and rebirth because of its karmic load. And so the goal of every jiva, every being then, is to free their jiva of karmic accretion, right, and to free it and to liberate the jiva so that it might exist in the upper realms in its pure and free and omniscient form. So Jains sort of extend this idea, though, of the jiva. They don't look at necessarily just what we would think of as sentient beings, but they really emphasize, for instance, the microscopic life. So the world is, and all these jivas are the same. So there are jivas, thousands of jivas, right? Thousands of souls, ensouled beings in every drop of water. Thousands of microscopic beings, right? Thousands of jivas in every dust ball. Thousands of jivas in the air itself, microbes and bugs and all sorts of things. So the world, in the Jain worldview, the world is crowded with souls. We just bump into souls everywhere we turn, every step we take, every breath we take, every move we make, right? We come into contact with souls. And all souls are alike. Ultimately, the microscopic jiva is just like the human jiva. It's bliss, energy, and omniscience, and is seeking liberation. But the other very important teaching that the Jains have about the jiva is that all souls suffer distress. That is, all souls suffer, and they want to live and do not wish to be destroyed. So every soul is this eternal jiva that has a right, in a sense, to its existence and does not wish to be destroyed, and it deserves the utmost of respect. Doing harm to these jivas, of course, is the most is the way that we gain negative karma. And so the goal of the Jain then is to seek to lessen the harm done to the jivas all around us. Now, on the Jain symbol itself, the strange sort of shape there is just symbolizes the Jain cosmos. And it's a very typical sort of tripartite cosmos. The lower part representing the seven hells into which beings might be reincarnated. And the middle part is the earth, the physical realm, the earth and the planets and the physical cosmos. And then the upper part in the small half circle there is the heavenly realm, the abode of the celestial beings and the liberated jivas. Now, many times the Jain symbol will have at the very bottom a mantra, which just says live and let live, which of course symbolizes this non-violent approach to life, this non-harm ahimsa approach, and the duty of all creatures to help each other. So there's this strong Jain teaching that creatures are to be friendly with each other and to help each other because all beings suffer, to help each other to live. Then we have the open palm, which is simply the mudra of do not fear, abhaya, symbolizing this fearless approach to life. And then the center of the palm is the wheel, symbolizing samsara with 24 spokes. And these represent the teachings of the Ford makers, the great legendary teachers of Jainism. And then written in the middle of the wheel is just the word ahimsa, or nonviolence. Again, symbolizing that this is the central virtue or value of the Jain life. Up above that you have the swastika, which is the symbol of rebirth and reincarnation, of samsara, and of also the four types of beings that might be reincarnated. The three dots above that are the three pillars of the Jain faith: right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct. And then at the very top you've got one dot. That's the Sidhu, the liberated soul existing in its pure, blissful, omniscient state in the heavenly realm. So the soul freed of all attachment and all karma. So if you look at this guy in the cartoon there, you can see his problem immediately. His boat is full of water. He's trying to bail the water out, yet at the same time the boat has sprung a new leak, and water is coming in as fast or even faster than he's bailing it out. So he's never going to get this boat bailed out. And this is very similar to the way Jains see the problem of existence in the world, the problem of samsara. That even as we try to do good things, try to produce good karma, at the same time, just through acting in the world, we are producing bad karma, and more karma is becoming attached to our life. So we're never really going to be able to liberate the soul in this way. It's just a downward spiral into the depths of samsara, like a leaky boat taking on water or karma. So in light of this, then the Jains have developed sort of a two-pronged approach to life. The first being restraint, and then the second being asceticism. So restraint are simply those practices which we'll look at in terms of the ethical precepts of Jainism, but these are just practices which help us to live carefully in life to prevent the production of bad karma in our life. So this is just a way of being careful in how we live, so that particularly so we avoid doing harm to other beings and therefore taking on new negative karma. So that's the restraint side of the deal, of the way a Jain will live. The other side is so that plugs the leak, that keeps new water or new karma from coming into our life. And then the second side of it is ascetic practice. This is the bailing out of the boat. So once we stop the leak and we stop new karma or water, new karma from coming into our life, then we use ascetic practice. So this is the renunciation of attachments in various ways. We actively renunciate attachment, and this purifies the karma that's already in our life, purifies over time. These ascetic practices purify the jiva of its karma and therefore allow us to work towards liberation. So the 5 great vows of Jainism are incumbent upon monks and nuns and lay people all together. So all Jains will seek to follow these 5 great vows and take these 5 great vows. And if you look at them, they're very similar at first glance to the 5 ethical precepts of Buddhism. So we've got, the first one is simply non-violence or non-harm. This is ahimsa, and this is very similar to the idea of not causing harm to other beings, not harming or killing other beings in Buddhism. Okay, so ahimsa or non-violence, non-harm. It's avoid. The vow is to avoid killing any life forms whatsoever, avoiding violence, and carrying out non-violence, non-harm mentally and vocally and physically. And this has a lot of sort of practical implications for Jains, such as observing where you walk. You don't want to be stepping on and perhaps crushing and killing microscopic or other sorts of life forms, bugs and other things that might be under your feet. And so this is one of the practices of Jain monks, is to walk with a broom, a little broom, and they'll sweep the path in front of them to make sure that they are not walking on life forms and thereby harming them. Also, simply just not moving around when it's unnecessary. So watching, just being careful in the way you move, because when you move, you might be harming a life form that is around you in some way. So being careful, for instance, where you set down your coffee cup, or so you'll sweep the table a little bit, clean the table before you set anything down. Watching where you sit so that you don't harm a life form when you sit. Just being careful. Inspecting food, right, before you eat to make sure that there are no life forms or anything that you may be about to ingest. Some monks and nuns will even wear a mask over their nose and mouth so that as they breathe, they're not breathing in life forms from the air and thereby harming or killing them. So it's a lot of practical implications for this one. And again, they take this much farther than a Buddhist would. Truthfulness, of course, is avoiding lying, but avoiding truth-telling that might be harmful, right? So you don't want to cause harm through your speech. Silence is the best, in a sense. Avoiding anger, greed, also mirth, like too much laughter, too much. It shows people who are always laughing. Just shows a lack of respect for life, not taking life seriously. So even too much mirth is seen as a problem. Not taking what is not given, again, very similar to Buddhism. This has been interpreted in the Jain tradition in a very interesting way, so that it includes the excessively prolonged occupation of any space of ground. So this is very interesting. So if you sort of make a home for yourself in a certain place, you seem to be claiming a piece of ground that's not really yours. It's you have no right to any one particular piece of ground. It's for all beings, right? And so this has caused the Jain monks to be wandering monks. They will not stay in any one place for any prolonged length of time. Instead, are wandering monks and just keep on moving. And it arises from this vow of not taking what's not given, not claiming anything as theirs. It's a way of, again, of sort of avoiding attachment to anything. The renunciation of sexual activity, again for monks and nuns, this is means celibacy, and for lay people it just means being very careful about sexual activity. Again, this is something very similar to Buddhism. Ideally avoiding any contact, mental or physical, with women for men, and male monks especially. And then avoiding eating or drinking things that might stimulate sexual desire. So just living a life in which you try to lessen sexual desire all across the board. Because again, sexual desire is attachment. It can also cause great harm, but it's a type of attachment that brings karma into our life. Limiting one's possessions. This is not necessarily one in Buddhism, although it's often practiced in Buddhism. Limiting one's possessions, so owning as little as possible. So this is renunciation of attachment to objects of the senses, possessions in particular. It's just a way of lessening one's attachment to the world, renouncing the world and lessening one's attachment. So living with as little as possible. And there is a whole sect of what they call the Jain naked monks, and they take this one so seriously that they have even shed their clothes. They never wear clothes, and this is a way of limiting their attachment. They don't own even any pair of clothes. So the naked monks. And the last one is eating after dark. This is, of course, difficult for lay people to do sometimes, but it is basically the idea that, of course, this one arose in an area where cooking was done over open flames and often outside. And so if you cook with an open flame at night outside, then you're attracting insects who are drawn to the fire and can be killed by the fire. And there's also this strong idea in Jainism that to properly digest food, you need to be out in the sun. So it's just about not harming life forms that you couldn't really see in the dark and that might be harmed through various types of activities. So the idea is, again, all is around this idea, the central value of living out life without doing harm to other beings, ahimsa. So we live in this world that is crowded with souls, and we are bumping up against souls in everything that we do, even by taking a breath, even by eating food. By moving, everything we do, we are bumping up against souls with the potential of causing harm to other souls. And it is by causing harm to other beings, this is the major way of bringing karma, a negative karma, into our own life. So therefore, the highest religious duty then is to learn to live in this careful, non-violent way in which we do not cause harm to others. So the Jain life is centered around this idea of not causing harm, giving up attachments, renouncing attachments that cause harm. Positively, it means friendship, goodwill, gentleness, and this lack of attachment to things. All sorts of practical implications, many of which we've already looked at. Things like lighting fires, even digging a hole, right? If you dig a hole, you may be harming the microscopic life forms that are in the soil. You might be harming worms and grubs and other things that are living in the soil. So these are things that Jains seek to avoid if possible. And then just this carefulness about life. Watching what you eat, watching what you drink, taking care as you move around, even breathing, right, is a potentially dangerous activity in which you might be harming other beings. So it's just Jains really seek to learn to live in this very careful way. So as I'm sure you can see at this point, what this works out to is the sense that life in and of itself, just living in and of itself, is an inherently violent activity. All the basic activities of life, eating, drinking, walking around, breathing, these are violent activities with the potential to cause harm to other living beings, other souls. So just imagine I live out in the country, and when I'm driving home at night in the summer, and I'm splatting hundreds of thousands of insects on the windshield just trying to get home at night that are attracted to the headlights. This is an immensely harmful activity, and I'm killing thousands of jivas and bringing all this negative karma on me. So that's just the act of driving home. So you can imagine the extremes of behavior, the saintly extremes that this ideal of non-harm will cause you to go to try to seek to eliminate all harm causing from your life. And of course, this is the Jain ideal. And this is why the monks and nuns go to such great lengths to eliminate harm-causing behaviors from their life. But for many Jains, it's just not possible, right? For lay people, it's just not possible. You have to drive, for instance, and that does cause harm. So there arose in Jainism then this idea that it's not only the act of harm itself, the act of doing harm, but the intention of doing harm that's also very significant. So this makes violence not just an external issue, but an internal psychological matter. So one can actually do harm inadvertently. But one can also commit violence, like just through the normal activities of daily life, which are violent, without carrying out a violent intention, like without harboring a violent intention. Jain's saying is this: even if a person does not kill, he becomes a killer if he has the intention to kill. That's the internal psychological aspect. So very important in Jain life is just seeking to eliminate this intention to do harm, and even if harm is done, violence might be done just in the normal course of daily life. If you can eliminate this intention of doing harm, then you are still lessening the karma that these acts produce. So this has really meant a couple things in Jain life, and one is just what they call this doctrine of care in motion, which we've mentioned. So you just try to live as carefully as possible. So you are meticulous and scrupulous and seeking to be careful about what you do to avoid harm. Movement, right, in itself is potentially a source of violence, right, because the world is crowded with souls. So you seek to be very careful, so not to destroy insects and small life forms by walking, or I guess by driving. You seek to be very careful in picking things up and putting things down to make sure there's no possibility of doing violence to tiny life forms. We talked about the mouth shield that's sometimes worn to avoid inhaling and killing tiny life forms. I guess that a Jain would seek, if a Jain lived out in the country like I do, he would seek to not drive at night, because that is obviously going to cause great harm. For monks, of course, this sort of careful type of life is taken to great extremes. Even at one point, washing the body, taking a bath, right, washing their body was prohibited for monks, because in washing their body, they are destroying these microscopic life forms that are on their bodies. And these are all ways of sort of protecting your jiva from bad karma. And on the other hand, there are these positive things about care, about living in a way that seeks to promote goodwill and goodwill for all other living beings. So Jains are well known for doing things like working in animal rights, creating animal sanctuaries where animals can live better lives. So often Jains are known to go and buy animals that are and release them or bring them to animal sanctuaries so they can live lives that are not harmed. Jains in India are known for building animal hospitals and places where injured animals can be taken care of, animal hospitals and things like that. Just all sorts of ways to actively promote goodwill towards other living beings, living in this very friendly way with other beings. So let's just talk for just a minute about what ahimsa means for eating. And clearly, the only way to eat without causing harm is to be a vegetarian. So I love this quote that it is no exaggeration to say that food is a potentially dangerous substance for the pious Jain. So this is a completely different way of looking at food than most Americans would ever even conceive of. We want to eat, we like big portions, we don't care, we just love to eat. But Jains look at food very differently, because all food, in a sense, at some point has been a life form or is a life form. And so therefore to consume, to eat, is to do harm to other life forms. So therefore it's always a potentially dangerous substance. So Jains have a very strict teaching about vegetarianism, and it has the most dietary limitations and exclusions of any of the Indic religions. So fish and eggs are off. You can't eat fish or eggs, and you would think that vegetables might be okay, but some vegetables, such as potatoes or fruit with seeds or mini seeds, onions and garlic, all these are vegetables considered to contain life forms. That is, seeds. A potato, if you put it in the ground, it grows. So the potato is seen as a life form. An onion, if you put it in the ground, it grows. Garlic, same way. Of course, garlic is also, in the Indic tradition, an aphrodisiac, which you would therefore seek to avoid that just because you're trying to limit sexual desire in your life. So all of these foods you cannot eat. Alcohol also is banned, not because of its mind-clouding implications of getting drunk, as in Buddhism, but alcohol is banned because the fermentation process destroys life forms. So, the most dietary limitations of any of the Indic religions. Ultimately, eating and drinking, right, are inevitably tied to harming life forms. You can't eat without killing something, even if it's a plant. So therefore, this is the idea of the final fast. So obviously, the saintly extreme then is to not eat. So this is, of course, Jains are very against suicide. Suicide, because that obviously destroys a jiva, a life form. And so this is an act called the final fast that is only undertaken at the very, very end of life. At the very end of a person's life, they might decide to do the final fast and they will just stop eating. And this is only undertaken when they are obviously very near death in and of itself. But this is the ultimate saintly act in Jainism, to simply stop eating. And therefore, that is sort of the last attachment, our attachment to food, and you're getting rid of that last attachment, and you are absolutely living in your final days this life that's completely void of harm doing. And so this is an immensely meritorious act, but never undertaken except in the very final stages of one's life. So these are just a few questions to think about as you consider the Jain religion and its focus on ahimsa. So do you think, just in general, that this idea of nonviolence is a good way to live? Is it nonviolence and living a nonviolent life a worthy goal? Or what are the positive aspects of living out ahimsa in your life, in one's life? What would be the positive aspects in your own life to adopt this attitude of having this careful way of living, to seek to avoid doing harm to other beings? Does it seem like a good thing? Would that make your life better? Are there negative aspects to this sort of life? What are the drawbacks to being so careful about not causing harm to other beings? And then I'm just very interested in this saintly quality of the Jain religion, how it pushes one towards more and more extreme forms of behavior, out of the ordinary forms of behavior, in the pursuit of avoiding harm and getting rid of attachment in one's life. So is it good to seek to eliminate all contradiction in the pursuit of a core value, whatever it might be, in this case ahimsa, nonviolence? Is this a commendable way to live, to seek to eliminate all contradiction, to go to the extreme, to live out one particular value in one's life? Well, it's just some things to consider.